I was on the train the other day sitting across from a guy who couldn't have been more than 20. His thumb was just a blur, moving in this rapid, almost frantic rhythm. Swipe, swipe, swipe. He was deep in a scroll hole. TikTok, maybe Reels. I couldn't help but watch for a minute. It was like a high-speed collision of information. A 5-second dance, the 3-second clip of a politician yelling, a 10-second life hack about cleaning a pan. What struck me wasn't just the speed, but his expression. It was completely blank. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't reacting. It was just this mechanical, hypnotic consumption. Then he suddenly stopped. He'd landed on a video. The caption read, "Learn JavaScript in 60 seconds." He watched the whole thing, a rapid-fire montage of code on a screen set to techno music. He watched it intently. As soon as it finished, he tapped the like button, even saved it to his favorites. And then, without a millisecond of pause, swipe. He was gone. Back to the blur of cat videos and prank clips. That moment just crystallized something for me. That little save felt like a promise he was making to himself. But that instant swipe, it felt like the truth. It was the perfect illusion of learning, the feeling of being productive, delivered in a 60-second dopamine hit. It made me ask, what is this learning we're all doing? And what is it we're actually getting addicted to? Okay, so let's unpack this. This deep dive is really about that fundamental paradox of short-form media, the whole TikTok, Reels, Shorts economy. We've kind of structured this discussion to look at this high-speed information thing from, well, 3 crucial angles. First, its impact, both the good and the bad, on actual structured learning and getting skills. Then, its role in marketing today, which is powerful but sometimes works in weird ways. And maybe the most critical part, the measurable neurological effects all this constant high stimulation stuff is having on our attention spans and just, our general well-being.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, isn't it, is how those core things, the sheer brevity and the high stimulation, create this kind of split personality. On one hand, this format can give you real academic boosts in certain situations, especially for remembering to teach right away. But then at the exact same time, it feels like it could be chipping away at the very mental tools we need for deep thinking, for pulling ideas together, for solving complex problems. It's potent stuff. Offers real utility, definitely, but potentially at a pretty steep cognitive price.
Okay, that tension you mentioned, utility versus cost, that takes us straight into education, doesn't it? Where short-form video is, like both the hero and the villain sometimes. We came across this really telling story about a student, Solan Rajesh, a young developer based in Bangalore. He was trying to shift into data science using these new e-learning platforms. They were almost all short chunks, 3-minute videos explaining algorithms, 60-second Python hacks, that kind of thing.
Right, and for Rajesh, these platforms felt super efficient at first. He could squeeze learning into odd moments around his job, and he absolutely crushed the quizzes on the platform. Why? Because each bit of information was self-contained, specific, made for easy recall, so he felt like he was really getting somewhere.
Productive, smart.
But then came the reality check. His knowledge turned out to be, fragile. He gets to his first big technical interview. And the task isn't just define this term, no. The manager gives him this messy, ambiguous, real-world business problem, something that needed him to pull together ideas from different areas, weigh the pros and cons, design a whole strategy. And Rajesh, despite acing all those quizzes, he just froze.
Blank.
And that, right there, that's the core issue we're seeing a lot in technical education. Rajesh realized he'd swallowed thousands of tiny facts, but he'd never built the underlying structure. He hadn't developed the thinking needed to actually build something complex or strategize. He mistook, quickly consuming and testing well on isolated data points for actual deep skill. It's like knowing the definition of hammer versus knowing how to design and build a house. Totally different levels.
Yeah, okay. But you did mention academic benefits earlier. We have to give credit where it's due. If it's done right, short form can really work. So can you define what researchers actually mean by micro-learning?
Yeah.
Because it's not just random scrolling, is it? And why does it sometimes deliver these results?
Exactly. It's definitely not just random TikToks. Proper microlearning is very deliberately designed. We're talking about well-planned, small learning units. Ideally, they're between 2 and 7 minutes long. Critically, they never go over 15 minutes. And each one is laser-focused on achieving a single, clear learning goal. The format could be a short video, maybe an infographic, a quick text, even a snippet from a longer webinar. And the evidence for its effectiveness, at least for immediate knowledge retention, is pretty strong. There's a big systematic review, a meta-analysis, that compared microlearning directly to traditional macro-learning, lessons over 15 minutes, often an hour or too long. The results: microlearning led to significantly higher higher academic performance. On the post-lesson theory exams, the microlearning group scored, on average, 12.6 points higher.
Wow, 12.6 points.
Yeah.
That's not trivial at all. That could be a whole grade difference. So what's happening in the brain? What's the cognitive reason that chopping things up helps us remember, at least initially?
It primarily comes down to managing cognitive load. Our working memory, the brain's RAM, basically is incredibly limited. It can only juggle a few things at once. Now, cognitive load theory breaks strain down into like 3 types. There's intrinsic load, just how hard the topic itself is, like, say, quantum physics. Then germane load, that's the good stuff, the effort your brain puts into actual learning and understanding. And finally, extraneous load. This is the wasted effort, the strain caused by bad teaching, like a rambling, disorganized 90-minute lecture.
Okay, so that long, boring lecture is just maxing out the extraneous load, the useless effort.
Precisely. Microlearning is brilliant at slashing that extraneous load. It presents information in neat, isolated packets. Your brain doesn't get overwhelmed trying to follow a million threads. By cutting down that strain, you free up precious working memory space for the germane load, the actual learning part. The brain just holds on to more when the delivery is clean and concise.
And what about forgetting? We all know that feeling of learning something and then it just evaporates. How does brevity help fight that?
Ah, yes, the dreaded Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Ebbinghaus showed we forget things incredibly fast, like half the info can vanish in an hour unless we actively revisit it. Spaced repetition is key. Microlearning is tailor-made for this. Because the content chunks are short, reviewing them is easy. You can rewatch a specific 3-minute video multiple times over a few days without it feeling like a huge chore. This constant, targeted revisiting slams the brakes on that forgetting curve. It helps move the knowledge from fragile short-term memory into more robust long-term storage, much better than one marathon cramming session.
And that flexibility must be a huge plus for, say, adult learners or professionals trying to upskill.
Absolutely. It fits the modern reality. It allows for self-directed learning. If you're a busy professional and just need a quick refresher on one specific concept, you don't want to sit through an hour-long module, right? You find that 3-minute video, watch it on your commute, and you're done. It gives learners control and fits into the fragmented time we all seem to have now. It kind of meets people where they are, attention span-wise.
But this loops us right back to Rajesh and his interview disaster. If microlearning is so good for remembering facts, where's the gap? Why didn't it translate to real-world problem solving?
The gap is inherent in the structure itself. The risk of content fragmentation. Microlearning is great for isolated facts, maybe simple procedures, but deep, complex subjects, think advanced strategy, medical diagnosis, sophisticated engineering design, they demand more. They require extended reflection. You need to connect many different concepts, hold multiple ideas in your head at once, see the relationships, synthesize. If you chop these complex topics up too much, you risk ending up with what Rajesh had. A pile of disconnected facts, not a real, usable understanding, a superficial grasp. You lose the big picture, the why, the interconnectedness, the complexity. That intrinsic load needs careful management, sure, but you can't just eliminate it without losing depth. Microlearning often nails the what, but can really struggle with the how to integrate and the why it matters strategically.
So the takeaway is microlearning is a powerful tool for building foundational knowledge for reinforcement. But it absolutely has to be combined with something else. Time deliberately set aside for deeper thinking, synthesis, tackling those bigger, messier problems.
That seems to be the sweet spot, yes. Use it for what it's good at reinforcing the pieces, but don't expect it to build the whole puzzle on its own. You need both. It's a tool with limits, and we need to respect those limits if the goal is true mastery, not just quiz scores.
Okay, so that tension speed versus depth, facts versus synthesis, it's not just in classrooms or on e-learning platforms. It's arguably the central battleground for every brand trying to connect with people today. We should shift gears now and look at the marketing side of this paradox. How do brands handle what the algorithm wants versus what actually builds real customer connection?
Yeah. It's a huge conflict, and it's captured really well in the story of Minju. She's a brand manager in Seoul. She works for this legacy company known for incredibly beautiful artisanal ceramics, you know, the kind of thing that takes weeks to make, very slow, very high quality.
Like the exact opposite of a 10-second TikTok video.
Exactly, and that was her problem. The algorithms on these short-form platforms, they're the gatekeepers, right? They reward speed, high energy, trending sounds, challenges. So her team felt forced to churn out these frantic, fast-cut 10-second videos just to get seen at all. And yeah, they got views, millions sometimes. But the audience wasn't engaging with the brand's heritage or quality. They were engaging with the trend, the sound. It was massive exposure, sure, but it led to basically zero real connection or, more importantly, sales.
Vanity metrics, essentially. Likes that don't mean anything long-term.
Totally. Minju realized this algorithmic visibility wasn't building anything lasting. People were just consuming it mechanically, like that guy on the train you mentioned. No real buy-in. So she made a pretty brave move. She decided to ignore the algorithm's demands for speed just for one post.
What did she do?
She posted a video that, by platform standards, was practically glacial. 90 seconds long. Just a quiet, steady shot of the master artisan's hands carefully applying glaze to a pot. The only sound was the soft background noise of the workshop. No trends, no quick cuts, no music. And predictably, the algorithm initially buried it. Reach was way down compared to their usual stuff. But the comments from the few 100,000 people who did see it were completely different. Game-changing, really. Things like, "This was so calming to watch," or "Now I understand why these cost what they do, and I actually feel connected to the person making this."
Yeah.
That single, quiet, 90-second video, focusing on the authentic process, built more genuine trust and loyalty than all the viral challenges combined.
That just perfectly illustrates the conflict, doesn't it? The platforms weren't eyeballs glued for maximum time, but real brand loyalty comes from content that resonates, that feels true. Which brings us to the holy grail for marketers, purchase intent, or PI. These short-form platforms are obviously vital for reaching Gen Z. They have huge market influence. But how do marketers actually bridge that gap? Get from just seeing a video to someone actually wanting to buy the product?
Well, the research is pretty clear on this. Just getting seen isn't nearly enough. Exposure is just the first step. Whether that exposure translates into actual purchase intent depends heavily on three other key factors. These are the mediators, the things that build trust and make the message stick. Okay, number one is perceived authenticity. Gen Z, in particular, has an incredibly sensitive radar for anything that feels fake, overly corporate, or too polished. They see staged content almost as an insult, and they just tune it out instinctively. So authenticity, meaning relatable, maybe slightly raw, unfiltered content, often shot simply, embracing imperfections, that's gold. It builds credibility and trust way more effectively than some slick, high-budget ad. That rough-around-the-edges feel is often part of the appeal.
Which explains why Minju's quiet, real video worked, even if the algorithm didn't initially love it. It felt authentic to the product.
Exactly. Okay, factor number two. Influencer credibility. Influencers are the messengers here, and their power comes from being seen as trustworthy, knowledgeable, and this is crucial, similar to the audience, like one of them. This is where big numbers can sometimes mislead. Macro influencers have huge reach, obviously, but often it's the micro influencers, the ones with smaller, more niche, dedicated followings who drive way more engagement and actual purchase intent. Why? Because they feel more relatable, more like a real person recommending something they genuinely use or care about within that specific community, like #MikTok or a specific gaming niche. Getting their endorsement can be far more valuable.
Credibility has to be earned fast in that quick swipe environment.
Okay.
So authenticity, influencer credibility. That's the third factor.
It's the engagement level. Just watching passively isn't enough. The audience needs to interact. Likes, shares, saves, and especially comments. Comments are huge because they open up a dialogue. It deepens the relationship, especially if the brand actually jumps in and responds. It makes the brand feel human. So smart campaigns aren't just broadcasting. They're actively trying to pull people in, asking questions, sparking trends, getting users to share their own stories with the product.
But even with authenticity, the right influencer, and engagement tactics, marketers like Minju are still sort of at the mercy of the algorithm, right? That gatekeeper decides who even sees the content. How does that algorithm actually work, and what do marketers have to do to get past the gate?
Yeah, the algorithm is king. Its main goal, fundamentally, is to maximize watch time, keep users scrolling, keep them on the platform. So it tends to reward videos that really hit home within specific niche communities. We call this micro-virality. If a small, dedicated group watches your video multiple times or shares it heavily within their circle, the algorithm interprets that as high-quality content for that niche and boosts its visibility. Because of this, the hook is everything. Non-negotiable. Those first 3 seconds determine if someone swipes or stays. Marketers use all sorts of engineered tactics. Start with a provocative question, use a countdown timer, show a quick flash of the amazing end result, anything to interrupt that automatic swipe reflex.
Okay, so the hook grabs them, but then the video itself needs to be packaged correctly for the algorithm to understand and distribute it.
Absolutely. Optimization is crucial. You need good platform SEO, essentially. This means using clear, relevant keywords in your captions, in any text overlays on the video, even in the voiceover. This helps the algorithm categorize your content accurately and show it to the right audience. And then there's the slightly weird factor, trending sounds. The data is overwhelming on this. Videos that use background music or sounds currently popular on the platform get massively more views, like nearly double on average. Why? Because the platform actively pushes content that participates in its own internal culture and trends. It wants more of what's already working.
This whole system being so reliant on these opaque algorithms, it feels like it raises some pretty big ethical questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially for consumers.
Oh, definitely. When the main goal is just engagement, just keeping eyes on the screen, rather than providing actual value or utility, you create an environment that's perfectly designed for impulse buying. These platforms are constantly tracking everything you do, what you pause on, what you like, how long your gaze lingers on a particular product. It's incredibly invasive data collection. This allows for hyper-targeting that, combined with the fast pace and the emotional triggers, can easily short-circuit thoughtful decision-making. You're constantly being shown things you need right now. It fuels a cycle of consumption that can be genuinely harmful financially and mentally. Marketers really need to tread carefully and responsibly here. And that responsibility includes recognizing that Gen Z isn't just one big group. You can't use a cookie-cutter approach. Things like gender, income, cultural background, where someone lives, they all dramatically change how marketing messages are received. For instance, how much transparency people expect from an influencer, or what counts as too much advertising, varies hugely across the globe. A strategy that kills it in the US might fall completely flat or even seem offensive somewhere else. Localization and cultural nuance are absolutely critical.
Okay, so we've seen short form can be efficient for learning facts under the right conditions. And it's incredibly potent for marketing if you play the algorithm's game. But now we need to get to the third part of this paradox, maybe the most concerning one, the actual physical and neurological price we might be paying for all this high-speed, high-stimulation content. What they're doing to our brains.
Yeah, this is where it really shifts into a public health conversation. There's a well-documented case involving a university student in Germany. Let's call him Lucas. He went to his doctor basically saying he felt anxious all the time and had this intense brain fog. He just couldn't focus on his studies, especially dense philosophy texts that needed slow, careful reading and deep thought.
And his screen time habits were significant.
Way beyond significant. He was clocking nearly 4 hours a day just on these rapid-fire short videos. Total immersion in that swipe culture. And what became clear was that his brain had, in a sense, been behaviorally reprogrammed. When he tried to do the hard, quiet work of reading philosophy, something that offers very slow, delayed gratification, his brain, now used to constant, easy dopamine hits, basically rebelled. It interpreted the lack of intense stimulation not just as boredom, but as something deeply uncomfortable, triggering anxiety. It wasn't that he'd forgotten how to read, it was more like his brain had developed a neurological aversion to the state of quiet focus required for it.
Wow. That's disturbing. The brain actively rejecting focus. So what's the mechanism here? How does this addiction take hold and lead to rejecting slower thinking?
It really centers on the dopamine flood. Short videos are like dopamine slot machines with a guaranteed mini jackpot every few seconds. You get a significant pleasure response for almost zero cognitive effort, low friction, high reward. When you bombard the brain's reward pathways, the very same circuits involved in drug addiction, by the way, over and over again like this, you're training it. You're training it to expect and crave constant novelty, constant stimulation, instant gratification. And this isn't just theoretical. Habitual, intense consumption, we're seeing averages in some places hitting 150 minutes a day, is directly linked in studies to measurable drops in sustained attention, problems with higher level thinking skills, and concerningly increased rates of depression and anxiety. The system seems almost designed to foster dependency on external hits of novelty.
You mentioned drug addiction circuits. That's a strong comparison. Should we be thinking about this in the same way as, say, substance abuse?
It's a really important distinction to make. Behavioral addictions, like excessive scrolling or gaming, don't cause the same kind of direct, toxic physical damage to neurons that substances like alcohol or opioids can. So it's not identical in that sense. However, the underlying mechanism of dependence, the way it gradually rewires your motivation, your focus, your emotional regulation pathways through repeated behavior, is very similar conceptually. The brain adapts. It starts to expect those easy, constant rewards. And that constant background level of dopamine stimulation makes the effort required for difficult focused tasks feel disproportionately hard, almost painful. It's less about a lack of willpower and more about the brain's reward system being hijacked.
Okay, let's talk specifics. Which parts of the brain are taking the biggest hit from this constant need to switch context every few seconds?
The main area of concern is the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. Think of the PFC as the brain's CEO. It's responsible for all the high-level stuff. Executive functions like planning, decision-making, impulse control, working memory, filtering out distractions, regulating emotions, basically what makes us rational adults. Now, the relentless, rapid-fire nature of these feeds forces constant, high-speed context switching. You jump from comedy to tragedy to news to ads in milliseconds. This endless shifting just overwhelms the PFC. Imagine trying to run 1,000 different demanding software programs on your computer at the same time eventually. It just crashes or slows to a crawl. The PFC's ability to focus, plan long-term, and manage behavior effectively gets degraded. And what's really crucial here is that the PFC is the last part of the brain to fully mature. It's still developing well into your mid-20s. So heavy exposure to this kind of hyperstimulation during those critical teenage and young adult years could potentially interfere with the structural development needed for mature decision-making and self-control later in life.
And it doesn't just affect us when we're awake, does it? What about scrolling before bed? How does that impact learning and memory consolidation?
Oh, it's a double whammy there. Using screens late at night, especially consuming emotionally charged content, which algorithms often prioritize because it keeps you hooked, does two bad things. First, the blue light messes with your circadian rhythm, your internal body clock, suppressing melatonin and making it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. Second, this sleep disruption directly impacts the hippocampus. This is a key brain structure, absolutely vital for learning and forming new memories. The hippocampus does its most important work during sleep, particularly deep REM sleep. That's when it consolidates memories, transferring them from fragile short-term storage into more stable long-term networks. If you disrupt your sleep with late-night scrolling, hyperarousal, and blue light, you're essentially preventing the hippocampus from doing its job properly. So not only are you struggling to focus during the day, but you're also impairing your brain's ability to actually store and retain whatever you did manage to learn.
It really starts to sound like this isn't just an accidental side effect of cool technology. It sounds like the entire attention economy is built on designing for this kind of cognitive impact.
Yeah.
Attention is the currency, right?
It's absolutely strategic. It's the business model. Your attention is finite and incredibly valuable. Platforms are in fierce competition to capture and hold as much of it as possible, and they use highly sophisticated psychological engineering to do it. Take notifications, for example. Those pings, buzzes, red dots, they're not random. They're systematic, deliberately excessive impulses designed to keep your attentional system in a constant state of over-alertness. They play directly on our fundamental human need for social connection and validation. This constant barrage fuels anxiety, doesn't it? That feeling of FOMO, fear of missing out. The notifications might seem repetitive, but crucially, they're designed to deliver a novel emotional surprise each time a new like, a critical comment, an urgent piece of news. This unpredictability keeps you constantly checking, constantly vigilant, stuck in an always-on mode, craving that next little hit of uncertain validation.
And the ultimate hook, the thing that really cements the behavior, is that slot machine effect you mentioned earlier, the intermittent rewards.
Exactly. That's the core addiction loop. Intermittent rewards, the whole system of likes, shares, comments, views, it's built on uncertainty. You post something, you scroll, you engage, anxiously hoping for that unpredictable hit of social approval. Sometimes you get a flood of likes, sometimes crickets. Because the reward is variable and unpredictable, it becomes incredibly compelling. This variable reinforcement schedule is, psychologically speaking, the most powerful way known to lock in a behavior, to create a habit that feels almost compulsive. It's systemic gratification designed to make you keep coming back for more, prioritizing those quick, rewarding actions over deeper, more intentional thought. Hashtag hack outro.
So, okay, where does this leave us? We've done this deep dive into the whole paradox of short-form content. We've definitely seen that the format itself, especially when it's structured deliberately as microlearning, can be really effective for certain things. It helps beat the forgetting curve for facts, no doubt. And for marketers, yeah, it delivers huge reach, especially into niche communities, if they manage to balance authenticity with feeding the algorithm. But on the other side of the coin, we've seen some pretty significant systemic risks piling up. There's the risk of trading deep strategic skill for just a collection of superficial facts, like with Rajesh. There's the constant battle marketers face against the algorithm, sometimes sacrificing genuine connection for mere visibility. And maybe the most alarming part, The potential for this constant hyperstimulation to actually physically rewire our brains, especially developing ones, making us neurologically less tolerant of the quiet, focused, sustained effort that deep thinking requires.
Yeah, and if you zoom out, try to connect it to the bigger picture, maybe the real potential and the real challenge isn't about the length of the content itself, but the nature of the message it carries. I mean, think about it. Short content can be incredibly powerful. A traditional aphorism, a Zen koan, a single line of poetry. These are short forms designed to spark something deep, right? To provoke thought, doubt, reflection, not just passive consumption. So maybe the ultimate test for short form media is whether it just stays stuck being this engine of constant mechanical hyperstimulation driven purely by algorithms and addiction mechanics, or whether we can somehow transform it. Can it become something that slips into our modern, overloaded brains almost like a digital Trojan horse, not just to distract, but to deliver those unexpected flashes of insight, those moments that actually make us pause, question, and reflect, the kind of jolt needed for real, deep learning and genuine mastery to actually find fertile ground and, take root?